Oh, somebody has addiction.
Addiction.
Yeah, is an alcohol.
Alcohol.
But you cannot say to him, how do you deal with this?
Here, where is the problem? The problem, whether the problem is in the mind, in the intellect part, or in the conscious part.
Problem of alcohol?
Yeah, whatever, any addiction, where is the way? But anybody when have some addiction may try to free from that addiction. Even the person who is thinking to free from this addiction, and for example, you have addiction, you are enjoyed alcohol. You have some interest you have some enjoyment, you have some interest by consuming alcohol. And the intellect also approves your interest for the alcohol. From the beginning, the intellect approves the consummation of alcohol. It say, okay, it is very good, very nice. Having alcohol is very nice. It says like that. But afterwards it finds some problem in the consumption of alcohol, and afterwards it comes to the conclusion, yes, I must control alcohol. So for a certain period, it assumes it may control with some willpower, it may have some control over that. So by controlling it, thereby it has some power, some satisfaction. So satisfaction also gives us some pleasure. So when in the first instance, the consumption of alcohol gives you some pleasure, and afterwards the controlling of alcohol gives you some pleasure. So your intellect acts through pleasure. It demands pleasure. In the first instance, it gets pleasure by consuming alcohol. In the next instance, it gets pleasure by controlling alcohol. So the pleasure alone is the operative force of the intellect. So here, the basic demand of the intellect is pleasure of something. Pleasure alone is the operative force of the intellect. So here it is a demand of the intellect to get some pleasure. So when the intellect demands pleasure, thereby it creates something in the beginning. It encourages alcohol, and afterwards it criticizes that I must be free from alcohol. So the pleasure is the operative force. The pleasure is still existing in the case of consumption and in the case of controlling. So that is why it cannot be free from the problem. So because the operative force is same, getting a pleasure is the operative force. So whenever there is pleasure to do something, it operates the intellect part to enter into something. So if you disregard if the intellect comes to the conclusion, everything is okay, then only you are free from pleasure. So you don't, because if you understand why I don't mind pleasure, even consumption, even controlling, both gives pleasure. So if the intellect don't mind the pleasure, then only the intellect does not interfere. Otherwise, the intellect gets the response to do something. So if the intellect wants to do something, the operative force is the seeking pleasure. And if the intellect wants to have some pleasure, then it takes some responsibility to do something. So whenever it takes some responsibility, the problem cannot be solved. So the interest has to understand, if it enters, the problem will be worst. So the intellect has to come to a conclusion. It cannot proceed further. It must understand its inability to control anything, inability to deal with anything. If you admit your inability, then only unconsciously, without your effort, without your knowledge, you will succeed from the addiction. But it cannot be succeeded consciously. If you do it consciously, it creates more complication in the addiction. The conscious effort to free from addiction will give more strength to the addiction. So all our conscious effort will give problem to the addiction itself.
So this with Alcoholic Anonymous. This
Alcoholic?
Anonymous. This is a group of, they help alcoholic get rid of the addiction. But the way that they do it is just, they say, we are powerless, it's only God can free us from that addiction.
So if they are sincerely believe this, the same thing happens, because you don't mind you do not take any responsibility. That means, giving the responsibility in the hands of God, it must be natural. That means, by giving the responsibility in the hands of means, your intellect do not take any responsibility. Then only it happens. Anyway, the intellect must be free from responsibility. Then only the problem will be solved. Enlightenment.
It's like a process. We can't like.
Is meant to say.
Just